Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming to the first Warrant Committee of 2019. Happy New Year to everybody. Our first object is to address our minutes of our last meeting that you have all received electronically. Are there any additions, amendments? If not, the chair will entertain a motion to accept them as presented.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you very much. We have 4 articles to discuss. We have discussed a couple of them already. We're very happy to have the Fire Building Committee come and talk about its article, which is requesting $2.7 million. And Chair Brian Walsh, who is a distinguished member of the town, served in many capacities over the years, and 2 of his committee members here. So Brian, we're welcoming you. Thank you very much for spending the time with us, and we'll be very interested to hear what you have to tell us, because this is obviously extremely important to many people in town.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a presentation to pass out quickly, copies for you all. Our Vice Chairman is Dan Clark. Dan is hooking up the technology so he can project as we quickly walk through. We also have, as Mr. Asher mentioned, another member, John King, with us here. We have a large board. We've got 11 members of our committee, and we've been working hard on your behalf, and I'm thrilled to be able to come here and give you this update. What's behind, where have we been? And as Mr. Asher mentioned, there'll be an article asking for the $2.7 million. So the article we hear about is really for the consideration of February is a joint submission from the Capital Planning Committee as well as the Select Board on behalf of the Fire Station Building Committee. I made this print large enough so I would avoid the glasses, but I failed miserably.
Oh, we all have the same problem. We should all have trombone
good.
arms at some point.
So those committees are really better suited to address the specifics as to the sources and methods of funding, the amounts, and the timing. I don't believe that it's yet voted on by the Select Board. I think they're going to finally do that this Wednesday, but it's all in progress, and we are working in sync with them. So Dan and I are going to give you a very quick 7 minutes, per the request of your chair, update on our committee. We were formed upon the completion of the Fire Space Needs Committee that concluded that there were 3 fire stations were needed to continue to provide service to the town. They specifically recommended they rebuild on the Atherton Street site, that rebuild on the headquarters site, and build the East Milton station at the old East Milton Library site, which is currently occupied by the Milton Arts Center. Quite frankly, that East Milton recommendation met significant opposition in the town at a town meeting that was held where it was presented, and also lacked the support of members of the Board of Selectmen at the time. So we considered it critical to determine whether it was possible to provide adequate coverage to the town with 2 stations versus 3. If so, we could avoid that whole East Milton controversy because we wouldn't need a 3rd site that close to one side of the town. We also considered every possible acceptable East Milton station location without using the old East Milton station or the old East Milton Library. We did a deep dive quickly on the East Milton station. Can we build on site? Can we do anything to rebuild on site? The previous committee ruled that out. Quite frankly, it's just not possible to build the 21st century with all the requirements and demands on that short, small parcel of land there. So that's out. So we did a lot of consideration. Dan will cover where we are. Let me leave with the clear understanding that this project is about the critical need to replace 3 wholly inadequate, decaying fire stations, 2 that are more than 100 years old and are among the oldest operable fire stations in the nation. Consequently, public safety is not where it needs to be in Milton. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan Clark to quickly go through our update.
So just to give some background.
Dan, we have to give you, I think, a microphone so you can be audible to our friends at home. All right, thank you very much. Yeah, good.
So just real quick to provide some background on who the committee is. All right. Just to provide some background on who the committee is and the makeup, we have 2
We have Chief Grant and another firefighter. We have engineers, construction managers, contractors, architects, and a former town moderator. So we have a pretty diverse group of people that are working on this project that bring a lot of different strengths together. That I think it's a very well-balanced committee that's worked well together to find these solutions and present this warrant article to you today. I'm going to hit on these 5 points. This kind of summarizes pretty quickly and expands on what Brian was saying in terms of where we're at. We really started with understanding what the Fire Space Needs Committee worked on, what they did. Myself, most of that work was done before I even moved into Milton. So we really took a deep dive to try to understand all what was done there. We tried to recognize what the station needs and requirements were. Chief Grant and the firefighters provided a lot of that information to us. Looking at other fire stations, visiting other fire stations that have been completed recently to understand what do other stations have that we don't, what is the big difference. And some people on the committee have worked on fire stations, so it was more relatively obvious to them, and others it was kind of eye-opening in terms of visiting it. Reviewing the national standards, both to understand what our existing conditions are, what our existing response times are, and I'll touch on that some more later. Existing, but also if we make changes, making sure that we meet and exceed those national standards. Reviewed other locations that were completed recently, Westwood, Randolph. So we've really been trying to understand what's the differences. Brian touched on this. We evaluated each station kind of individually and holistically amongst each other in terms of how do they work and how do they operate. We came up with some pretty easy conclusions with Atherton and headquarters. Engine 2, which is East Milton, we'll touch base on a little bit more later. But one of the big things that we also looked at, which was touched upon by the Fire Station Needs Committee that we felt like really wasn't truly vetted 100%, that we took a deeper dive into, was the possibility of consolidating headquarters in East Milton into one station, maybe in between the middle. We came out of that with understanding that we really needed 3, and I'll touch base on why next slides. And then we reviewed the program, which is the program in architectural terms is what you need for a building. It outlines, how many bunk rooms do you need, how many bathrooms. A lot of that comes out of the building code. A lot of it comes out of, understanding how many firefighters there are, men, women, and also projecting what does the fire station or department look like in the future. You try to anticipate what it is going to be. Is there any possibility of adding other engines, bringing engines on, things like that? So a lot of that information comes straight from Chief Grant.
Question?
Yes.
How many females are currently on the Milton Fire Department?
Off the top of my head, 2.
2.
But don't quote me on that.
Okay.
I know I have personally met 2.
Okay, thank you.
Out of a force of?
56,
Whoa,
I want to say.
thanks for that follow-up.
I think, don't quote me on these numbers off the top of my head, but I can follow up with you and get you exact numbers. It's in the program
But
information.
it's a small percentage, I'm guessing.
Right.
It is.
Just thinking about bunk rooms.
Right,
I was wondering.
right.
Yep.
And how that might grow over
Yeah,
time.
Yep. Currently, all bunks are individuals.
perfect, thank
Yep.
you.
Project schedule and cost review, we hired a limited OPM, which is an owner's project manager, somebody that works on public safety buildings, to be able to give us some context and help us evaluate some of the work that was done by Castle Booz, who was hired by the Space Needs Committee, understand what their starting point was. Was it right on, too big, too small? Was there places we could make reductions? And then also to understand what are the current pricings that are coming in right now for other stations, and also understanding where do they project the construction costs going into the future. One of the big things that we see now is the future cost of construction is really kind of an unknown. There's a limited workforce in Massachusetts. Personally, in the work I do and the OPM does, we're projecting 10% escalation currently through the next several years. So that's a big reason and motivation to try to get this done sooner. So where we're at right now is we have asked for qualifications from owners, project managers, and designers. We've gone through and we've shortlisted 3 designers. We're going to go through that process soon with owners, project managers. And the whole point of that is to try to consolidate this process. We don't have funding currently to hire either of them. It's outlined in the request for qualifications for both that it's all subject to this process and special town meeting. But the idea on the committee was to do that process, to come out, if we get approval, to be able to hit the ground running and not have to take the 2 to 3 months to go through that process to advertise for an OPM and a designer, have to review their qualifications, interview them, shortlist it, call references. It's time consuming, so we were trying to consolidate that, so hopefully we can hit the ground running. Which brings us to meeting with the Capital Improvement Planning Committee, warrant article town meeting. So just to kind of highlight some of these big things and really show how comprehensive a look that we've taken, we hired a firm and spent a little bit of money to understand what's the historical data and trend and what is happening in East Milton with the fire station, with the fire departments and the fire stations. So these two maps here just kind of show you 5 years of the last 5 fiscal years of all the calls that were answered by the fire department and where they're located. Those are all little dots. You can see some are actually outside of Milton because of mutual aid agreements. But we were able to verify 96% of the addresses and call types. So it's not perfect because the systems at the fire department are so antiquated that there's no automated system. Modern stations today, if they get a call, it ties into the town's GIS system. They know when the call came in, when they left, when they got there, everything. We don't really have that data. So we had to kind of, plug most of it in and get pretty close. But you can really start to see where are the calls. Red dots on the left are ones that don't get within a 4-minute response time, which is the national standard. 90% of your calls need to be answered for a career fire department within 4 minutes. So we're at 95.5% currently. So one of the things that we also wanted to look at is kind of heat maps and seeing, and you can identify, there's hot spots within the town, obviously, where more calls are coming in, and you can see the current headquarters are all positioned pretty well within that area. So one thing that we wanted to also understand is if we were to move the East Milton station, because we had an idea early on that the existing site didn't work based on the fire space needs committee work. So we looked at if we pulled it to the west side of 93, how far west could we pull it? And to give ourselves an idea of where is our working area to identify potential sites. The site that you see up there in the middle is roughly within the Cunningham Park location school. So we understood that if we pulled it as far west of there, we maintain 95.5% response within 4 minutes. So there's no real impact on the 4-minute. What it does is people on the east side go from a 60-second to a 90-second response time to a 1 to 2.5 minute response time. But then people on the west side are quicker response time. One of the other things we noted with this is actually 70% of the calls that East Milton responds to are on the west side of 93. So it's actually a big benefit to pull it to the west side if possible, because that's where the majority of the calls are actually going to. The last one here, you can see a lot more red on it. This was if we were to consolidate headquarters with East Milton. It met the national standard. It came in at 90.5% roughly calls within 4 minutes, but it takes into no consideration future growth of anywhere in Milton. So we felt as a committee and made the recommendation that it just, even though it met the national standard, it wasn't the responsible thing to do for public safety within the town. So real quick, just to summarize, Engine 1, which is headquarters, would stay within the general vicinity, possibly an addition or a whole new building. That's why we need a designer to start working through those feasibility options and schematic designs. Engine 2, East Milton, we're still trying to work through those site selections, but we have a really good idea of what that station's size needs to be. And the cost impact of designing that is pretty minimal, not knowing exactly where it's going to go in the overall cost of that station design through design development. It's more the construction cost in terms of where it's going to go that will be impacted more than design cost, because you don't know exactly what site work you're going to need to do for prep. You're not going to know if there's a building there you need to move or remove or do work on. So it's more the construction cost that's a little bit of an unknown. The design cost is pretty well locked in at this point because we know the size of the building. In Engine 4, there's vacant land that the town or that the committee felt was adequate enough to make an addition, renovation, repurpose of the building, combination in that sense, work with there. So just to dive into East Milton a little more, I mean, we've explored a lot of areas. We came down to that red area that you see drawn there. That's really where the station needs to go to maintain or improve upon the existing response times. We've identified some outside. The blue dot's DPW. The orange dot is the cemetery trustees have a little bit of land on Brooklyn Center. They're just too far west. We have identified some other ones. So we're still trying to work through this to understand it. And that's one of the reasons why we really need to bring a designer on board is that we need the help of an architect and an OPM to help us truly fully evaluate a couple of these sites to really understand what the best case scenario is. And just to touch on where we're at in this process, really this is what we've done as a station building committee to date. We're really touching the conceptual design, and this is through many hours of people that are on the committee volunteering their expertise. We've really maxed out what we can do without hiring somebody. And what we're really looking for is we've asked for 2.71 million, but we wrote the request for these OPM and the designer with the caveat that we're only going to issue a contract through fall 2019 town meeting, which roughly works out to 630, 650, somewhere in that range, $630, $650,000 is what we want to issue for an initial contract. And then if town meeting, and then come back to town meeting with everything fully vetted, everything with an idea of what the buildings are going to look like, where they're going to be positioned, exactly how everything goes, so we can come back to town meeting and ask for the construction phase. And the reason why the request is 2.7, the 2.7 million will get us through the whole process that you see here, which is that phase 2 design and then through construction if town meeting approved it. We thought it was better to consolidate the requests into design and then into construction so that when we come back in hopefully fall of 2019, we're just asking for the construction funds because the 2.7 covers the design for everything from start to finish to the day they move in. But we do have the ability to, if for some reason things didn't go well and we need to either pivot or the project's not going to go forward, we're not on the hook for the 2.7. The contracts for the OPM and designer, as standard Architectural Institute of America contract languages, it can be canceled at any time for any reason. There doesn't have to be a reason. So we do have that caveat. We're asking for the full amount because we think it's better to keep these projects together. And then come back for the construction. So quickly as a starting point, we used the Fire Station Needs Committee work as a basis to design. I threw some pictures and plans up there. This isn't what it's going to look like. This is a starting point. This is a really rough idea to understand how big is the building, 1 floor, 2 floors, things like that. We looked at this with the OPM that we hired, and they said we were probably within 10 to 15% for each building and the spaces. There were some areas we could save some. So we felt like this was a pretty good program to run with. So with that, we were able to kind of understand what are the design fees going to be. And this all stems from, if you know how big the building is and you know how much per square foot the costs are coming in at right now, which is $5 to $5.50 a square foot is what fire stations are coming in at. We can start to understand what the buildings cost. And the industry standard is building costs for an architect, they usually, and all their subs, their structural engineer, their all their enclosure consultants and geotechnical and civil engineers, their overall cost for that entire design team is 10% of the building cost. So that's kind of what we've run here with. This is just to show a cash flow that we shared with the Capital Improvement Planning Committee. We plan this in an idealized world where we can start designing all 3 stations, have them slightly staggered behind them, and run the same way in construction. As a starting point, in terms of financing, this is kind of worst case scenario because you're really consolidating. We know that this is probably going to move out and based on design and cash flows and things like that. But we thought it was a good starting point. Similarly with construction costs, you can see how you ramp up and then you taper off through the fiscal years. And then when you kind of compare that to overall, this would be, you see the beginning first fiscal year and a half there. You have just the design phase, then you ramp up through construction. But this kind of summarizes it better. The red line shows what you're spending month by month through the fiscal years and how it lines up with the design. So the key thing is I threw the town meeting date on, rough date for town meeting in October. We're really trying to get through that design development phase, which is that initial phase, so we can come back with an idea of pretty well thought through plans And for context, what the Space Needs Committee did when they went to town meeting, they had schematic designs. So we're really trying to take it beyond what they came with and try to have a more fully vetted idea of what's going to happen, and then come out of that town meeting and take the town's comments and bake them into the construction documents. I know I went over 7 minutes, sorry.
You're fine, because I'm sure you answered some of our questions that I know will come up. But thank you very much for the presentation. Warrant Committee, I'm sure you have questions. Yeah, we should get lights again. Yeah, no. Thank you.
There you go.
Please, Christine.
Just a clarifying point, if I understood what you said, the figures here are based on industry standards, which are based on a idea of what the outcome will be? Is that accurate?
Yeah, so the actual numbers for what we'll spend on an architect, it's negotiated. So when we hire an OPM and we hire a designer, we have to make the selection based on MGL on qualifications alone. And after then you rank them, and then you go to the first one and you negotiate a fee. So we have an idea that 10% is about where it should be for the overall, but we're going to negotiate just a phase 1 fee, and we have an idea about what that should be as a committee. So we would negotiate it. If we can't come to terms, we would then go to number 2. If we can't come to terms with them, we'd go to number 3, and if we can't come to terms with them, we'd start the process over again. So that a lot of that is dictated through Massachusetts general law.
So the 2.7 that you're asking for is just the design fee?
It would be for a designer from the day they start till the day all 3 buildings are done, and for an owner's project manager from the day we start till the day we're done. And
Can you describe what the owner's project manager
And the owner's
would do?
project manager is a state mandated requirement to hire for any public project over $1 million. And really what they're going to be doing is they're going to be controlling the architect, not controlling, they're going to be overseeing the architect through their design process. They're going to be working with the committee, they're going to be working with the town, they're going to be helping to set up the meetings. And then when they get into construction is where they're really invaluable. They're the people that will be there every single day watching it. They will hire clerks of the works to be out there monitoring all the paperwork, what's getting done, the progress, the spending, monitoring any changes that happen, any deviations, things like that.
And then the next 2 slides that you showed us, the construction cost, the total looks to me like it's $20 million, and the project costs are 22.7,
Correct.
roughly. Those aren't combined, correct? So we're looking at 40.7.
No, those are combined.
Those are combined?
Yep.
Okay.
So it's design plus construction equals project
For the 3 building sites proposed.
for all 3.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd like to add at this time too, but I'm sure you've heard about it, but we are in the process of potentially receiving a pretty substantial donation to cover the construction of the headquarters station that is not finalized. A lot of work's been done in the background between the donor, who is working through a member of our committee, Webb Collins, and town council.
Well,
And so that could have, we still need to get the architectural plans.
course.
This phase that we're asking about now is still got to be funded for the town, but that could substantially reduce the overall cost of the project.
Brian, Dan, John, can you talk about the site selection? Right now, we know we're keeping the Atherton Street site, and the headquarters, which is back here behind Town Hall. Talk to us a little bit about the selection for the 3rd site, the East Milton site.
Sure, so there's,
And what the committee is thinking.
okay. So we're trying our best to find an alternative to the old East Milton Library, which is occupied by the Milton Arts Center. That site would work. It's on the west side of the expressway. It would work, but there's a lot of opposition to it as well, okay? So we committed to, and we're looking for any alternative. We've already met with the Milton Art Foundation. They were very gracious. They heard a pitch. We thought, did I say the Art Foundation? The Milton Cunningham Foundation, Cunningham Park, where the public pool is, et cetera. That's a very large parcel of land.
Big front.
They have a lot of unused land. We thought it was reasonable to go to see if they would potentially parcel off a half, 3/4 of an acre for us. They were gracious. Long story short, it's not within the scope of the requirements of the foundation. They felt that it violated that, and consequently they weren't interested. However, one little promising note to the side is they said, maybe we should talk to Milton Art Museum and folks for a long-range thing. We don't know how that'll work out, but I thought it was gracious of them. So that was a site. We have town council is working on finalizing a letter that's going to go out to every Milton resident within the district and identified as acceptable locations, requesting, does anyone have a piece of property, and we describe what we're looking for, that they would be interested in selling to the town. It's a process that's been used by other towns. It's not always successful, but it can be. So we're doing that. In addition, Dan touched upon a few sites we looked at. We have also, we're doing our best to identify locations. And until that letter goes out to the town, unless we were to find one, beforehand, and we exhaust that, we won't know what all the possibilities will be. But that has promise. It's not, it's not something that we could count on absolutely, but it has promise. It's worked.
One of the other things that we have talked about as a committee is eminent domain, and we've elected to really try to stay away from that. It can be very messy, and it's really kind of an unknown. You don't know what the end result's going to be, so we felt like it's not fiscally responsible to really go through that method.
But by the way, one other thing we didn't spend on, we didn't exhaust can we rebuild on the site?
Right.
Can we rebuild on the site
In
and
East Milton
purchase,
Square.
I'm sorry, the East Milton Fire Station, thank you, Mr. Can we rebuild exactly on that site and also purchase another parcel of land, addendum to it to make it work? So we looked at the practical realities. There's one side of the fire station, it's not a practical option. It's where there's a sub and pizza shop, it's an active business.
Right on Adams Street there.
Yeah, on Adams. It's not practical. The other one was, long story short, we couldn't make it work. We could not make it work.
We would need, there's 3 small sequential. They're all, the existing site's like 0.18 acres. The next one's only like 0.09, the next one's like 0.1.
And you need 3/4 of an
You need
acre
a
to make this
half
work?
an
A
acre,
half acre?
minimum to really make it work for the site, the building, parking,
And
all
keep
things
in mind
considered.
that the standards today, once you start building a new station, there are standards that, of course, that station just doesn't meet, but you have to meet them. So a little bit more in terms of size.
That's another key point that we didn't mention is there's the building code. Once you spend a certain amount of money on a building, you trigger having to make those ADA requirement upgrades and things like that. All 3 stations need enough work that you would trigger it easily, even through a maintenance program. So that's one of the things is even if you did maintenance on some of these things, you're going to trigger that.
As you walk through this process of finding another location for the East Milton, there has to be a value to that fire station site in East
Exactly
Milton
right,
Square.
yeah.
Have you thought, I'm sure you have, of netting what that sale would be to the town?
Thank you for asking that, because another thing we didn't share with you. Webb Collins volunteered the use of his firm to actually do a professional financial analysis of what value is the old East Milton Fire Station to the town. Because if we were to purchase or acquire another piece of land, that's something that the town could use to offset.
Right.
So he's determined it's in the neighborhood of $1 million, but for the right potential buyer, for example, Richard Wells has shared with us as chairman of the board, a select board, that he's been approached a few times by different banks that would just love to have that particular presence. I mean, it's a key spot.
Perfect spot.
For certain businesses. So you could net even more than that. So, George, we think that will produce enough money to buy a parcel.
Yeah, I think that'd be remarkable because, I mean, after a fashion, you could almost use that to do something for the Arts Council and take the East Milton spot. I mean, I'm just guessing that you've talked to them about that as
We've
well.
even considered that and had a conversation. Could we use that to build something somewhere for the Arts Center if we had to use that? Again, the East Milton Library, or the Arts Center site, it will work, but we haven't given up the opportunity to find, we think we can find a better lot. It's still very congested there. If you can visualize yourself the times a day, if a fire engine has to get out of there fast at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or at 9 o'clock in the morning, it's still challenging. They're not wide streets, there's all kinds of issues.
What about the park in between those 2 locations? It
The
seems,
deck?
yeah, advantageous because you have
The deck we
egress
wouldn't
on
be able
either
to do
side.
because if we did the deck, in talking to the select board, it would roll back money that they've already received and that they'd have to pay back. So we were basically told that it's not a
It's
feasible
almost $3
option.
million that have to pay back.
You can't build it with that.
It has to be kept as a park, if I remember, open
That's
space.
all
I
you can
remember
do.
that
When are they gonna make it a
negotiation.
park?
Well,
Sorry.
well, that's what it's called. I mean, Wendy, when they did this years ago, it
Anything
was,
on that site.
yeah, yeah,
Not a road, not a parking lot, not anything.
yeah, it's really kind of high.
It's a shame.
But,
Seems
you know,
like
one-
That would be a great
location for it.
spot. You're not wrong, I think.
One thing
Very
to
distinct.
keep in mind, too, the really good news, though, is we are in a position to be able to deal with the Atherton Street Station and the headquarters station
Yeah.
while we're, you know, that gives us some time
Yes.
to settle down a selection of a site, right? I mean, in other words, we'll do undoubtedly the East Milton Station is the last phase of the project, and hopefully that'll give us enough time to really vet out everything we have to and maybe find a good solution.
And two other things that we didn't touch on, one was, part of the reason for keeping these together is there's definitely a cost savings with hiring one firm, even if they do get spread out. There's a lot of education that happens with the town, with an architect, to be able to work through these. And then the other thing that's critical is, one of the things that we have seen pricing come in on, and one of the reasons why we're trying to identify ways to do these stations to keep the fire departments and stations operational at their existing locations while we do buildings behind or adjacent or some combination there, is we're starting to see what the cost is for temporary, if you were to take the central headquarters and do a renovation. The cost for housing during a construction project is somewhere $1 to $2 million for a headquarters and $500,000 to $1 million for substations. So that's a cost we're trying to avoid because it's literally throwing money away.
And by the way, at Atherton Street, we'll be able to avoid that because there's enough land behind where we would do the major construction of the new station, then we repurpose use of the old one. At headquarters, either way, we're going to build the majority of it abutting the existing headquarters and open land. So we'll avoid that interim thing. And if we can find a new lot for East Milton, that'll be the last thing. And that's, you know, it's serious money, as, you know, Dan just summarized.
Can you give us a sense of you have a distinguished committee, and you've got lots of talent on it, and I'm sure you have a lot of different opinions on the committee, and I compliment you as chair for being able to keep the consensus. What is the sense of the committee and the direction of the deliberations, and are you moving in lockstep, or how is it going?
You know, so I'm thrilled that you asked that. I had the opportunity to operate as town moderator. I appointed the library building committee, and if any of you have seen, I think the library is just a great combination of new and old and merged together. They did a terrific job. I appointed for several years members to the school building committee. I would tell you that our moderator has appointed an incredibly talented committee here. It's a pleasure for me to work with the expertise. I have no architectural and building experience. The amount we have at that committee and the willingness of everyone to really dig in and work has been tremendous. So I believe, you know, we've covered a lot in the period of time that we've had. I'm confident that we'll continue to keep a great pace, and I'm confident that we'll come up with a good outcome.
Further questions?
Is the most recent draft of the article the one from November 19th?
That was something I drafted to the capital improvement planning committee, yes, and sent to Mike Kennedy, and I don't think anybody has revised it.
Okay. The phrasing of it,
Yeah, it was sent as a draft. I thought somebody was gonna pick it up before it went
yeah,
to you
that's
guys.
kind of what it reads like.
So it was a starting point just to get kind of the framework in there.
Okay.
I asked that question to Mike Dennehy this morning, and he said, I think it's the draft, so I think it needs to be wordsmith.
My guess is they still have to go through a discussion at the select board, that once they make their determinations, then there'll be a concentration on cleaning up the language of the article. I don't know what the requests are, timing for you folks, but they're probably against it right now.
You can imagine.
Well, yeah,
We
so
have that
it,
plus the budgets, and
it kind of
it's a
includes the
challenge.
choices, determine whether the money will be provided.
Yeah,
and
Right.
that was the
from
second
these-
step through me.
Yeah.
The language has got to be the same as any capital
Yes.
article. If you read Article, 7 or 6 or whatever it was from
They
last
leave as
year's
many
annual,
doors open as they can.
the wording has got to be similar to that.
And that's the way it's currently worded. And I didn't know if it had to say that way or not.
Yeah, it's by statute, I think, right? It doesn't.
Was it custom?
If you read 10 different warrants from 10 different towns, you'll see 10 different languages, so.
Tom, you were co-chair of the Capital Committee.
Yes.
I received the approval, their approval, yours and Amy's letter. Can you talk a little bit about the committee's discussion and what happened there?
Yeah, well, primarily, we listened to the fire building committee, and I think we did agree with them that the whole, letting out the whole 2.7 was warranted, that it was important that the contract be cancelable, by either party on quick notice, because there's no guarantee at this point that, that, to be perfectly honest, there's one of two ways that one of three ways that these things get built. One is the gift, if that comes through. The other way is what we'll call Article 37, which is the trying to keep the debt exclusion money that we already have and kind of cap that and set up a debt service fund, a debt stabilization fund. Under that model, we could raise $7 million by 2022. But this has to go out for referendum vote because it's in essence an override. And the third way is just a plain and simple debt exclusion. If they don't vote in favor of Article 37, if the town says no, then the only other way that you're going to fit this much debt on the town of Milton is through an override. It's not going to happen.
That's going to be very hard to do. Okay.
Real quick,
Clinton.
I have no voice, so sorry about that. There's a East Milton post office there, right? And then next to there, that's where you try to build the Milton, the East Milton fire station.
That's one scenario.
One of the sites.
One of the scenarios.
One of the sites.
I know there's a lot of kids in that area, and there's also, this way all the opposition is coming from the neighbors. Very busy. The East Milton post office, so logistically speaking, that's quite a challenge. Besides the Milton Arts Center being, given to the town, so.
Yeah, we're well aware, because of the work of the Fire Needs Committee, they held public meetings, and we're well aware of the neighborhood opposition, which resulted in members of the Board of Selectmen opposing it, and as well as the Milton Arts Center. A well-deserved following in town. They do some great work. I mean, you drive around town, you see their work. So that's why we'll leave no stone unturned looking for an alternative to that site. Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you very much for coming. Thank you.
We're grateful
Appreciate your
for
time. It'll take a little longer.
No, this is fine. Okay, so we have, ladies and gentlemen, articles on the Fire Station Building Committee, the sale of the Kidder Branch, which we have discussed several times. I propose that we have a couple of votes tonight, certainly on those two. If anybody has any objection at this
So
point.
we're voting on the draft.
We should vote on, I think we can vote on the draft. I think, or the final language should have been submitted to us by now, I would have expected. But for some reason, we haven't got it. I'm sorry?
It's gone through the select board? No.
It has not gone through the select board, but we can vote on the Kidder Branch sale tonight. The final draft language for the Fire Station Building Committee, and I believe two others will be voted on Wednesday. At this point, we can certainly have discussions, and if we have to delay the vote until after we get the final language, then I think we'll be okay, which would mean we would probably cancel our Wednesday meeting and move our meeting, have another one next Monday night. And I think that's probably what we're going to end up doing. Does anybody have any objection to voting on the Kidder Branch discussion?
The only, the last time I'd asked that we asked town council why Kidder Library is any different than the Governor Stoughton property in terms of, I don't know that we got the answer to that. Governor Stoughton, we were not able to sell that property without asking the Attorney General, basically because the will said that the land was to be used. Not that the land was to be sold and the money used, but the land was to be used. I don't know, I haven't seen the will of the Kidder will, but if it's written in similar language, then why is that different than the Governor Stoughton will? Because we had a petition, the Attorney General saying there is no way that we can use the land to benefit the poor of Milton. We're not a farming community any longer. So the only thing we can do is sell the land and use the money. And they eventually agreed, but
Tom, I have a recollection that, and I might be wrong, when the library folks gave the presentation that they said that they had vetted through council.
Yep.
yeah,
I feel like
The difference would have to be in the language of the will.
Yeah.
It strikes me.
right. So it's a
So-
simple question, is, just is the language different such that we don't need that? And that's fine. I don't think I have any other opposition to it. I just would like to know that.
I think there was I'm looking in the warrant for 2018 October when we sent this back to the library trustees, and a question of that was raised, and we did get some information. I'm just looking now at the language that we got from town council. I cannot, hang on one second. If I can find it, that might answer your question. That there was a stipulation that permitted the sale, provided that the funds were to be used for the benefit of the library, that there was actually a clause which allowed for the town library trustees to use their discretion for the disposition. And I'm just trying to find that language. It may be in here, it may not, but I'll look and see if we can find it. But I think we have asked town council, and he said that they are within their rights to do that. But I can't find it. So it's easy enough to get John Flynn to give us a read on that. Yep. And we can do that. That's easy enough. But
Yes, I'd be happy to vote it contingent upon that being favorable.
Does anybody else have any concerns about that? Okay, well, anyway.
There's an email on the point. Like that might be what you're
Yeah, that's what I'm reading right now too,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to decipher it. Is this the one from John?
John Flynn.
Nathaniel Kidder in his gift
Oh,
of that
that's it.
land may have restricted the trustees requiring sale benefits to run to the library. If so. So I guess he actually doesn't state a conclusion. He's saying it's a possibility. But that might be the language.
That's exactly it.
That is, yeah, that's what I was just reading.
When was it? When was it?
It was an email sent to us from Lynn on, let me scroll back up, on December 28th
Yep.
at 5:47 a.m.
Okay.
Goodness,
Wow,
she
Lynn.
needs to sleep.
She has little kids, so she doesn't.
Lord.
We know what that's like.
So she emailed us on the 28th, and in it, that's the one, I just pulled that up too. In it,
Okay, here it
this
is.
person, John, and I don't know his last, I can't say his last. Is it Cronin?
Yeah, John.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
He's the one who goes in depth around this whole thing and about who can buy it.
12:28, what time?
5:47.
I see it, okay.
Yep.
It doesn't seem to be a conclusion.
It doesn't.
Though, it's talking about possibilities, so.
I don't know if we get a conclusion, if that, just remembering that email, I don't know if we get a conclusion in that case. So I think it is the discretion of the library trustees that we do this.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we're going to get any further clarification beyond this. But I think the question still remains before us. Do we vote to give the library trustees that flexibility to sell it and do what they, because apparently they've had everybody in town through the site, and I don't know if the Milton Arts people have gone over to see it or not. I'm afraid to ask that question. Yeah, right. So the question before us is, do we have a consensus to take this vote tonight and just give them the latitude to go ahead and dispose of the property for the highest bidder? Or do we want to talk about it once more or wait for further? I think we've had as much input as we're going to get.
Is that what the vote would be? Like, if we approve it and they get a buyer, then there's no other additional
We give them the,
approvals? Right.
Yeah, yeah,
On
the town,
the
we recommend to the
article.
town meeting, and the town meeting will vote on it and give them the flexibility to do that, and apparently that's it when it's done, because they're the responsible governing body.
I'd be happy to talk to John Flynn personally and report back, and I'd be willing to vote it contingent upon that tonight. But I don't want to see the town get into some kind of a mess,
No, I understand that.
and I don't think it's very clear from that. You know, I'm guessing it's going to be fine.
We have taken votes before, and we have reversed ourselves when we got further information, so I don't see any reason to do that. So we plan on our meeting next Monday, and we'll vote on the remaining 3 articles. Plus, we'll also talk about the budgets, which should be coming in any minute for the different, and frankly, I'm surprised we haven't seen them by now, because we usually have. But at that point, we can revisit this, should we need to, based on any new information that Tom gets from John Flynn. Is that acceptable to everybody? Okay. So if that's the case, let's look at the wording for this, which is in our shared drive for the, let me pull it up, for the article that will discuss the sale of the Kidder branch. Traffic impact.
There's a lot of traffic.
Yeah, right, there sure is. I'm going back to get this. Electronic things are wonderful. The problem is that,
It's the first one in the shared drive.
that's right, that's what I'm going to. Okay, so we all have the language? Okay. See if the town will vote to transfer the former Kidder Branch Library property at 101 Blue Hills Parkway from the trustees of the Milton Public Library for library purposes to the trustees of the Milton Public Library for the purpose of sale of said property, and further to authorize the trustees of the Milton Public Library to sell said property for such consideration and upon such terms as the trustees of the public library deem appropriate, and to act on anything relating thereto, submitted by the trustees of the Milton Public Library. So the chair will entertain a motion to approve this article and recommend it to the town meeting.
So,
Have a second? Do we have any discussion?
Are we going to make it contingent upon, or,
This is the discussion.
I mean, I don't know if that's a friendly amendment or not, but.
It would be, if we consider it a friendly amendment, sure. We're all pals.
That, you know,
Right.
the same motion, just contingent upon discussion with town council about,
To be conducted by the next meeting.
yes.
Okay. Okay, Christine, did you have something?
I have a question.
Go ahead, please.
This is a new, first year question.
No problem.
How does something like this get sold? Like, who manages that? I'm just thinking about how badly the rental part of this has been managed, and like, do you get where I'm going?
I understand, because I remember the interchange when they presented. It was a little eye-opening, I agree. I imagine they will hire a realtor to list it.
Is there a
Well,
standard operating
beyond that,
procedure?
there's mass general law that deals
Yeah.
with
It
sales.
requires them.
Fair market value.
Right, they have to have an appraisal, at least one, if not 2 appraisals, yes? By general law?
In terms of real estate, I'm not sure. But
Yeah, I think there are several.
We have
because it's-
mechanisms in
Real
place.
estate-
There are mechanisms for
Okay.
the sale, at the very
Gotcha.
least, that will govern this, that will go through the town as well. So the library trustees will work, and they'll be the responsible parties, but there are sets of eyes that are going to look at this as well. And again, I think the town meeting still has to approve whatever happens ultimately.
And it
I'm not
could
sure
look
about
totally
that, though.
different.
I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that either. I think
Yeah,
the
I
trustees
think
can do
I-
it, but the town administrator will have a role in overseeing this.
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember asking the question whether ultimately the sale is at the full discretion of the trustees, and I think the answer was yes.
I think that is accurate, but there are mechanisms to make sure that it is handled appropriately.
Well, I
Within
think,
the
I mean,
town.
probably.
Yeah.
I don't know what they are. I mean, here's the thing. But from my perspective, I think that we can. There are probably safe assumptions that we can make, and that we have some institutional knowledge on what that might look like. But at the end of the day, we can come up with the definitive answers for those questions, I don't know how much of a difference it makes. I mean, at the end of the day, we're saying to the trustees, you can sell the property at your discretion based on whatever laws and regulations there are.
Yep.
True.
Well, let's rephrase this. We're recommending to the town meeting, because this, I'm sure, is
You're
going to
right.
be discussed at town
Of course,
meeting.
of
I mean, the
course.
questions that we asked are absolutely what other people will certainly be wanting to know, and I don't think that's wrong. Because this is patrimony of the town, right? I mean, how many people, I mean, an X million-dollar gift to build fire stations is fantastic, but, you know, what was the last big gift? It was probably this one in 1927. So...
Well, I guess, so then, in answer to this, going further on this, if the answer was, there's really no oversight, they can put it on Redfin and then just be done with it, then would that change our vote? And if the answer is yes, then I think we need to figure out what the
What
parameters
happens?
are.
Yeah. Well, can't town meeting members amend this and change this
Oh,
however they
yes.
want?
Oh,
I mean, that's
absolutely.
my understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you kidding? We've seen it
So-
happen.
Right, I know, I just.
Multiple times.
So it doesn't even, I mean, we could come up with a scenario and they might take that suggestion, but they
We
might
can also
also.
write it into our commentary
could.
section, which I think is something that would be appropriate at this point for those of you who have taken the responsibility to draft this.
I think it's me.
Yes.
And I'm gonna help you.
And that will be, I believe that's very much, God help us. I think
I'm
that's-
just gonna agree with
Yeah, well, you would be in good company. I think that it would be very much in order to have that. But if we want to take the vote, which I think is not a bad idea tonight, at least one of them, and have it contingent upon information that we might receive from the town council that might influence a reconsideration of it next Monday night, then I think it's in order.
And who's gonna be the one talking to town council?
I'll call.
Tom,
Perfect.
Tom has volunteered. And even if you want me to invite John to come to talk to us about that next year, I don't think he'd object. But I don't know if it'd be essential. If he just wants to send us a memo, we can have it posted as well.
Yeah.
So with that caveat that I'm sorry.
Before we go to a vote, I just wanted to, because it's been a couple meetings since I registered, and especially coming off of the Fire Station Building Committee's presentation, where they're talking about a former library building that is a potential spot to move a fire station, having the flexibility of having town land that's available for any of
Other
the number
use.
of growths in the future down the line. I would be opposed to selling a long-term capital asset if there is any other use that it can be put to in the short term, so.
Sorry, what are you saying? You want them to use that building?
No, she's saying she
No,
just
but
wants
if you
them-
want to look at that building, but just the flexibility, the Milton Art Center is a former library, so
Right.
that was the reference, is that you, taking a former library building and putting it into use so that it's still town land, that's for the benefit of the town, the Milton Art Center being an incredible benefit to the town until, and if maybe there's a time where the town needs that additional space rather than selling it, and then you would have to go around and repurchase from neighbors rather than having plots of land.
And we all know what that would cost these days.
Right.
So anyway, I think that is also something to incorporate in the comment, because our sense is important to convey to the town meeting, because the vote is the vote. We're all one vote, and you can win by one vote. But if there is a substantial disparity of interest and opinion, which there clearly is, that should be reflected. For those of you who are drafting comments, it's not outside of propriety to say the committee did discuss in distinct and very explicit terms that there was a difference of opinion on the sale, and that the town should do X, Y, and Z, consider this, not dispose of the asset, it should be repurposed, if it's possible, et cetera. So that's something that we can certainly do, but to give the library trustees, what they're asking us for now is the recommendation to send to the town meeting, the library trustees to have the flexibility to dispose of it. And I'm assuming, and of course, they have said to repurpose the funds for the benefit of the library, which was the intent of Nathaniel. I read that part, the intent of Nathaniel Kidder's gift. So with the caveat that we will hear from town council if that influences us for reconsideration next Monday, the chair will, we've already had the vote, the motion and seconded with the change. So all in favor as amended, to permit the library trustees, to recommend to the town meeting for the library trustees to have the flexibility to dispose of the Kidder property. All in favor?
Aye.
Let's take a, I want to count this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in favor. All opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 opposed. Okay. And I would think that in the comment reflect that it was a split vote. It was not a clear majority. It was very much a split vote. There were two absentees, and the chair did not vote. So you can say that as well. And you have that, right?
I wrote
in the
that down.
minutes?
You read that good.
I wrote
Okay.
that.
Okay, good. Definitely. Okay, so if that's the case, I think we will defer further discussion. We've had all the information for, the school committee also
Yeah,
voted.
that's what I was
That's
gonna
right, the last one, we can talk about this one even if we don't want to vote on it yet. The school committee has asked for the formation of a building committee. I don't have, I have the letter from Kevin Donahue, and he was, of course, here a meeting ago to talk about this in detail. We do not have a draft of that.
It's in there.
I haven't seen it. Have I missed? Oh, yeah,
It's
here we go.
inside the letter.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah, yeah. But that is not, I don't have it as language that's been approved by the select board
I do
yet.
not have that either.
I don't
Yeah,
have
it's
that,
just
so-
a letter.
It's just the letter, but I don't have the article language itself, and without that, I don't believe I can bring this to a vote. But
Well-
we can talk about it. I'm sorry, Kevin.
I think here, within the letter from the chair, Richard Wells, there is language in there to see if the town will vote to establish, might I share it with you?
No, I have this, I'm looking at the same letter.
But it's in the second paragraph.
I see that, yeah. But as it has not been, I don't have the approval copy from the town. That's the problem.
The select board.
The select board. So, to vote on it, we can certainly talk about it. And if,
I'm missing it.
we can have discussion on the subject, and we can take the vote at the next meeting. It might even help, since we're here for a few minutes, we can talk about it.
The other ones.
Everybody wants money to build. We heard this, we heard the demographics, we heard the issues that have confronted them, and they're asking for a school building committee to be appointed. What are the opinions around the table about this?
I think it's urgent, and it certainly makes sense.
Is there a downside?
I can't think of one myself. You can talk about anything, right? There's no subject that's,
Doesn't cost you anything.
right.
Well, they're
My
asking-
father used to say, talk is cheap, right?
They do say to see what sum of money the town will
Right.
vote to appropriate for the committee's purposes. So
And that's
it's not-
something they
But
clearly have
that'll
to
come
talk about.
down the pike. Basically, this is to authorize the moderator to appoint 9 members.
Yeah, as he did
It's
with the
just more work
the
for
fire
him.
station building committee, and that's been
You
terrific.
said, I'm sorry, I was confused. You said not free. We're not actually voting to approve a sum of money. It's a
No.
committee.
Oh, just a
Just
committee.
to appoint the committee. No, they haven't asked for a dime
It's
yet.
to allow the town moderator to appoint a committee of 9 people.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. There's no harm. I guess there's harm in talking, but none that I can see.
Well, we know it's going to cost, so that's the harm, I guess. The issue is going to be, do we have any objection to that? I look around the table.
Not in principle.
I don't see
In
it.
in principle, no, but in terms of the composition of that committee,
Yeah.
to exclude the town side, I think is not correct. And I
To
would-
exclude, I'm sorry, what was that, Tom?
I believe, it's not in front of me right now, but I believe that basically that did not include the town administrator.
No, it could be anybody.
Well,
The
it's
only,
I think the only thing it said was 2 members.
2 members, it says,
That's it.
the language actually says to authorize the moderator to appoint 9 members to
Right.
serve on the committee, 2 of whom shall be members of the school committee.
so there could be
That's
7.
the only 7, there could be 7 people out of the fruit center.
And I would want to
line.
make sure there is representation on the town side. If we're going to have an article and have a building committee, and it's going to be 2 school committee members, I want to make sure that there's town.
From the town administration.
But do we want to include that, refer it back to have that as part of?
Well, we haven't really seen, I guess we haven't
We
seen
haven't
the
seen the
article.
language, this is nice, but it's, I just don't know exactly what the
Well,
select
before
board
we
is
see
going to
the
want.
language, maybe it would be nice to let them know.
I think we can reflect that. I can certainly send an email to Mike Dennehy, and Mike watches these proceedings, God bless him.
So he knows now.
He'll know that we have a sense that
does
we would
watch
like to have, he does.
I know, and then emails you about it.
I get lots of neat emails, and it's really good because it keeps all of us on our toes. So one way or another, we will have that reflected back, and I hope that will be reflected in the language that we see coming through. So from that perspective, I think we can dispense with the Wednesday meeting, and we'll meet next Monday, hoping that we receive all of the information that we receive, the final versions we can vote on. We already, I think, have talked most of them through, and at that point, we'll have budgets, and you all have the committee assignments, and we can just proceed from there.
Can you
So
tell me again which articles?
the articles that we will vote on, that we,
Because I only have 4. I'm
there
missing
are
one.
only 4. No,
So with the school building, there's a new one.
if we get that one. There's the, well, yeah, right. Let me just pull this back up.
Sorry,
You
George.
got the
It's
traffic
all right.
mitigation one.
There's
There
the
is that-
traffic, is
Okay.
that, there's one traffic mitigation one.
Yeah.
Right, then there's the,
Setback.
right, chapter 10, and then there's the Kidder Library.
Chapter 10.
There
It's
is.
Chapter 10 I was missing.
Right, let
Thank
me go
you.
back. And then there's the Great Estate Planned Unit Development, which we have, it's setbacks and height, and the Fire Station Building Committee
Yep.
Kidder, that's 4. 5 would be,
would be the school building.
So chapter 10, isn't that setback one, the building one? Is that what
That's-
Brian just said?
That is chapter 10 also, but the traffic mitigation, let me get this.
So there's 2 different ones within
There are
that?
2 that we have from the planning board. I believe.
oh, the setback is
Setback
the
and
great
then-
estate.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it should be really straightforward, and if we have a need for further input in any of these, I will see if maybe perhaps Mike can come and talk about them next Monday as well. So anyway, if that's the case, we will have no meeting Wednesday. We'll move that agenda to Monday next. I believe we have this space also. As Lynn is away, I'll double check, and I'll send her an email to make sure that she knows about that. And if that's the case, I'll ask if there's any new business we need to consider before we adjourn. Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Good job. Thank you very much, everybody. Good night.